to the second day and December 3rd special meeting of council. The City of Parksville recognizes the Coast Salish peoples and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. I need a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda. Councillor Wilson and Councillor O'Brien. All those in favor? Thank you. It's approved. Correspondence, the Mid-Island Habitat Enhancement Society input for 2020 to 24 municipal budget. I need a mover and a seconder to receive that. Councillor Fraz, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in favor? Carried. Staff presentation. We have 4 staff presentations this afternoon. Are they all by you, Mr. Butterworth? Yeah. All right. Would you please provide us with your presentation?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is budget meeting number 2 for the 2020 to 2024 City of Parksville budgets. And so today what we're going to be going over, if Council approves, is changes from the November 5th budget meeting. I'll review those. We'll look at the new accumulated surplus numbers. We'll go over the equipment replacement reserve. That forms part of our budget bylaw. Further review of any November 5th items, if Council wants to bring anything back or has any questions on any of the items that were in the previous meeting. And then we'll go through the water and sewer funds. So the changes that we had from November 5th, what we've done is added CEPTED into the budget for 24,000 years. So this is crime prevention initiatives. We put in the fleet building heat pump for $40,000. Reduced the PCC grant. The facilities is again relating to PCCC for 2020. We've increased the pool study public engagement by $10,000 and added in Retagno Park improvements, which weren't in the original plan last week. And those are, all of those items, except for the top 2, are from council resolutions since the last meeting. So, and these are on, just so you know, they're on page 5 of your agenda, and it shows a little description off to the on the screen here. It's not showing a description on the right-hand edge, but on page 5 of your agenda, the same items are there, and they show the little description. Any questions on any of those? Oh.
Pardon? Oh, Councillor Wilson, sorry.
Through your worship, Lucky, can you, or I shouldn't call you Lucky, I guess, should I? But can you tell me what is included in the CEPTED, or do you, is that something you would know? Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship, this item, through you to Councillor Wilson, is regarding the crime prevention through environmental design principles. And so staff have, in increasing amounts over the last few years, had to react to, for example, around City Hall, we had to remove benches and install rock design elements to reduce crime. We've also had to clear trees from certain areas, increase visibility, improve lighting, and just do some general improvements around certain facilities to reduce the opportunities for crime. So we felt that it was prudent at this point to put something in the budget and come up with a sort of more strategic approach where we would choose, you know, working with Bylaws services and the RCMP, we would choose areas that would benefit each year and kind of retrofit them. So, for example, PCTC is probably going to be high on the list most of the time. The community park, Foster Park, certain trails where there's a number of incidents that occur, or really anything that comes up, you know, that needs a little bit of budget, either for materials or to address, you know, the design of a building. So we would pick 1 or 2 items every year up to that amount. And it would also give us some more flexibility in dealing with vandalism that's unplanned.
Any other questions? Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this has changed those items that has changed our accumulated surplus. The previous one, I think we were in 2024 down to 500 and something thousand. It's increased it, mainly the PCC reduction, grant reduction, wasn't in the previous one for the future years, so now it's in there for all 5 years of the plan. The grant is actually removed for the other 4 years of the plan, so it has increased our 2024 accumulated surplus back up to around $1 million, which is a little under where we'd like it, but it's pretty close. So, as you can see, we still have issues with the years beyond that. And onto the equipment reserve. So the city has an equipment replacement reserve where we use internal charges for any equipment that's used, mobile equipment that's used for a job, so we can charge it out to the jobs. And that serves to bring revenues into the equipment replacement reserve fund so that it can fund replacement of the equipment. So this is what the statement looks like and what the draft budget bylaw would look like when we bring the budget bylaws back to council. So we have internal earnings, which again is the charge out of the equipment. The fund earns interest on any reserves or balances that's in there. Then we have proceeds from the disposal of the capital assets that are in the reserve. Operating costs on the expenditure side, gas, oil, repairs, parts, pieces, all that kind of stuff. And then the capital costs for replacing the equipment. So as you can see in 2020, there's quite a high capital cost for equipment that needs replacing. Some of this is from 2018 or 2019 where the equipment has not been purchased and it's pushed out to 2020, and just a listing of some of the ones that making up that large number. We have a 2005 tandem axle dump truck, 2006 single axle dump truck. We have the cube van, which is 1999, sweeper, and a mower, forklift, and some sanders, 3 different sanders. So those are what's making up that large number of 880,000. I will also point out that 880,000 will not cover the purchase of all this equipment. Costs have gone up since in the reserve it tends to keep older costs in there. They're not updated annually. So when these do come back to council, there will be a number of them that may need a cost increase or extra funding in order to purchase the item. Those will come with reports to council as they come forward. So. And so as far...
Excuse me, Director. Please, go ahead.
Through the mayor to Director of Finance, Lucky Butterworth. Lucky, I just wanted to check on, as far as some of the vehicles go, you've listed off a number of different items. When it comes to the replacement of some of these vehicles, are we stretching them out as far as we can in respect to the fact we've got a very large, full-blown service center now that's managed by employees and your own mechanics and so on? Has that saved us a lot of money by not having to repair or return vehicles, I should say, or change vehicles?
That's not that easy of a question for me to answer, not being involved in that area. I will say a couple of these vehicles are, all these vehicles, the 2005 tandem axle dump truck, and they're both on 10-year replacement plans, and as you can see, it's now far beyond the 10 years replacement plan. The longer you do keep pieces of equipment like that, the more repairs you tend to have on them. So there's a bit of a trade-off between how much staff time. We only have 2 mechanics down there, and they also service the fire trucks as well. So the older your vehicles get, the more servicing you're going to end up having to do on them, which will make those 2 staff down there either very busy or not enough to actually do that. So there's a bit of a trade-off between extra staff or having a vehicle that doesn't break down as often. You see the 1999 cube van, very old vehicle, but doesn't have a lot of miles on it, it's my understanding, and it keeps running, so they've retain that one as opposed to replacing that one at 10 years as well. The sweeper, again, is another 10-year one, and so it's at 12 years. So some of these items are aging, and they're so far a little bit beyond where ideally we'd like to replace them. But I would defer your question perhaps to the Director of Operations for further comment.
Thank you, Worship. I'm probably going to say the same thing. So just wanted to remind council and staff that we do have a motion or resolution from the previous budget process where staff in operations were directed to start tracking metrics and looking at how we manage fleet and in some cases reducing the life cycle or increasing the life cycle depending on how often you have to repair. And one of the items that they would be considering is the downtime when you have a crew and something happens, you got to go and repair. So at the last budget, council actually approved a specific truck for the mechanics. So we only started gathering the detailed metrics relatively recently. So I think over time we'll be able to provide better information. We're also working on asset management for this year. So there'll be hopefully much better detail in terms of tracking and looking at where that threshold is that it makes sense to replace versus repair. So we hope to have more information for you relatively soon.
If I may, Your Worship, just further to what the CEO has said, I do have, from our chief mechanic, I do have some anecdotal comments regarding certainly the first four there. They're spending an inordinate amount of time in maintenance trying to keep them on the road. So they are definitely, we're definitely stretching our very expensive vehicles.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe through to the CAO. We had talked a year ago about the number of vehicles here at City Hall. Are we eliminating some of them, or have we eliminated some of those? Okay. Okay.
If I may, Your Worship, so that's essentially the items that for the general revenue fund that have changed from the last meeting, or the new items in the equipment replacement reserve. So I do have on here the previous presentation. If there was items in the previous presentation that council wished more information on or to discuss, I can flip to those pages on the previous presentation. Otherwise, we would be moving on to the water and sewer funds. So.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So it's the same question.
Could you repeat it for the benefit of...
benefit of all the people?
Yes.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Greer. So you will notice there are 3 empty spaces in the city parking area. We redeployed several pool vehicles. Some of them that used to be dedicated to particular positions or departments are now shared. We have not noticed a huge negative impact on staff, on efficiencies in that regard. We've also, in the last budget round, eliminated the purchase of 2 new pickups. So we have definitely reduced the fleet and then redeployed so that it's reducing the need for new vehicles as we move forward.
Maybe just a follow-up. I was wondering on weekends, do any of the staff take any of the vehicles home?
Not that I'm aware of, unless somebody is on call, through your worship.
Yes, that's fine.
The only time that staff would have a vehicle is if they are expected to respond directly to an emergency or a burst water main or something. So we tend to have at least one person on call every weekend, and I believe there might be one, except for the fire.
Because I notice on weekends that there is several cars missing, and I was just wondering how many staff do take them home, or whether they are supposed to take them home or whatever.
If I may, Your Worship, it's only, we have a new policy that we brought in this year, and so it's only if people are on call, or in some cases, counselors or staff are able to take vehicles to a particular training event. It's usually cheaper in those cases than mileage, but sometimes they might also be at the yard for service on weekends, so if there's specifics, I'd have to maybe deal with them at the time, but we do have a policy that says, if with permission of the CAO, they can be taken for training, which I know some of you have availed. But typically, for someone to have a vehicle sitting at their home, they must be on call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Butterworth.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion on the November 5th, I just wonder if we would like to see if there's any questions from the public at this point.
You're a half a step ahead of me, but okay. Yes, is there anybody from either of the two individuals in the audience, if there's any questions on the budget to this point, on the financial plan? Seeing none, please go forward. Do we have to do the...
May, Your Worship. So this would be a presentation on the water and sewer funds. What we're going through today is a similar format to what we had on the previous general fund on November 5th. So we have the plan building blocks, budget adjustments from the previous plan, look at the 5-year capital plan, draft provisional financial plan bylaw, accumulated surplus, and other items to be considered. So the building blocks for both the water and sewer fund are included here. So we have water rate increases in the plan of 2% for each of the years from 2020 to 2024. The sewer rate increases 3% from 2020 to 2024. That's an inflationary increase. And then we also have the RDN wastewater charge, which we're moving over from property taxes, which ranges from 20% in 2020 and is down to 12% in 2024. So some fairly significant increases in the sewer rates. That second charge is offset by a reduction in the RDN wastewater charge on the general taxpayer. So they are actually supposed to be a net zero. It isn't equal for every taxpayer, though. There are certain ones that will have a reduced charge, and certain ones that will end up with a higher charge as a result of this switch. Inflationary rates used, operating costs, we're using 2%, and for capital, 2.5%. So we'll go through the water fund first. So operating budget adjustments, this is in Appendix W, and it is on page, I do have it here, page 7 of your agenda. There's additional comments in there. So we've got with the new water treatment plant coming online, we'll be mothballing the river station. For 2020, it's on standby, so there is some reduction in costs and then further reduction costs in 2021. So you can see the savings from the river station costs. Then we also have Springwood wells. There's some reductions there for well redevelopment costs, and the railway wells, the same thing. Water meter repairs, that's a scale back of the water meter replacement program. So fairly significant reductions there. And the city share of ERWS costs, which came from the last ERWS board meeting, we have an increase in 2020 and then reductions in 2021 to 2024. The large reductions are primarily the elimination of the contingency that's in that budget. And for minor capital, we have works adjacent to development. This is a budget item we add in every year. We only put it in 1 year at a time, and it's so that if there's any development or construction going on, and it could be city has a contractor doing something and they find something next to the work we're doing that requires replacing, bringing that back to council for a budget amendment doesn't fit with the timing of when the when the road or the grounds opened up. So we need to have some ability to approve those things at the time. Our staff will go out and review them and assess the quote that contractor gives us. And then we can move forward on a timely basis on that. We also have decommissioning of reservoir number 3. This is a duplicate reservoir to reservoir number 4, I believe, the one up at Top Bridge anyways. It's been, since the Top Bridge one was built 10 years ago, the number 3 hasn't been used. It was kept as a backup, but it hasn't had to be used as a backup, so proposals to recommission it. And we also had a fire hydrant replacement program in the budget that has been in there for a lot of years, working its way closer to reality, and we don't really need that in the budget anymore, so it was in there at $50,000 a year. They are replacing the hydrants as they go right now, so we don't need a separate program to do them. They're replacing a number of them every year right now, so we remove that from the budget.
If I may, through your worship, to Mr. Butterworth, just a question that was brought up here regarding the city share of the ERWS operating costs. Just, it leads me to another question. Is there any provision or opportunity to change the shared formula with the ERWS with the other partners other than the city of Parksville? Is there any opportunity to change the percentage with those other partners with the ERWS agreement?
If I may, Your Worship, I don't know if there's a provision to change it. I believe what we do have, though, is the costs may not be split. If we ship them currently on the river station, we were actually shipping them a higher amount than the share of ERWS. We were shipping them more than 26%, or 26%. So if that happens with this one, and I'm not sure, the Director of Engineering might have a better idea about this, but if we ship them 30% of the water coming out of the water treatment plant as opposed to their allocated share, then I would think the operating costs, at least, of the facility would be shared on that basis of how much water we ship them. I'm not sure if the agreement, I don't know, haven't read the agreement closely about that, or whether that's the operating agreement's even in place for that yet. I'm not exactly sure, so I'd probably want to defer that to the Director of Engineering, if I may.
Would you care to wade in, Director of Operations?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor O'Brien. Yeah, the agreement, I think what we're going to do here is we'll be, as time goes on here, and we'll be operating the treatment plant and monitoring the demands of Nanus on the system. We're going to be settling into having to relook at the agreement because there is an opportunity on the assumptions that are made in that agreement as to what the usage was going to be. If the usage is going to be higher from Nanus than what was originally anticipated in there, we're going to need to address that and charge accordingly. We're also going to be doing a review of all of the infrastructure related to getting that water to Nanus and to make sure that we're accounting for all of the shared infrastructure under that agreement. So we'll be looking at that over the next couple of years to try to make sure that it's representative of the service that's being provided and the water that's being provided.
As a follow-up, if I may, Your Worship, that is through to the Director of Engineering, Vaughn. Thank you very much. That's pretty well the answer I was hoping for, because it has been a moving target, and you're well on your way to opening very soon now. So there's been a lot of changes since that original agreement. So you're on top of it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. You mentioned that the city's share of the ERWS operating costs would be elimination of a contingency budget, but in past experience, we tend to have some budget issues and some needs always going forward, so why would we eliminate a contingency budget?
I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, I don't believe we are entirely eliminating contingency in the ERWS operational budget. Is it?
If I may, Your Worship, yeah, for 2020, the contingency is still there, but in
Right.
2021, it was removed, and 2021 on, there was no contingency in the
Right,
budget.
so, and if I may, Your Worship, as time goes on, we'll from year to year, we're going to be trying to anticipate how much contingency we're comfortable with the next year. It's not that we're never going to need it. We're not saying we're never going to need it after 2020. It's just that after we have some time in operating the facilities, we'll get a better comfort as to what that contingency can be. Because right now, I believe it's 200,000 right now. And as time goes on, when we get more comfort and understanding of all the factors in operating the equipment, I'm hopefully going to be able to reduce that a fair bit going forward.
Any other questions? Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Where did I get to here? Okay, so I think we've finished that page. So this is from page 8 of your agenda, and it's the capital expenditures over 5 years. Again, it's a long list. I don't want to go through all of them. I will point out a few of them. The one in yellow at the bottom there, your page actually says 100,000. That was a mistake on the page that I had put into the agenda. It does not affect the budget because it was just I think I took the amount from the general fund and put it in the water, but it's 60,000 is the amount. That was in the budget. It is in the accumulated surpluses that I'll be presenting. It's just a matter of this page, which isn't linked to anything, had the wrong number, so that should be 60,000. Other items on here, just to note, there's a number of items that had budget cost increase, the Finholm, Hearst Avenue. There's a new project for AC pipeline, Highway 19A from McMillan to McVickers. In the general fund, there's a plan to repave that section of the highway over 4 years, and there are some water lines that they would like to replace at the time. There's also some budget cost increase on Memorial, Mills and Morrison. Actually, the second Morrison on there, Finholm to Acacia, is a new project added into the budget. Another new project is Sanderson Road. That's out in 2023 and 24. And the last one is just underneath that 60,000 yellow item is the city share of ERWS capital costs. So that's for the settling pond that's needed for the wastewater from the plant. And that is 50% DCC funded, so the water ratepayers' cost is half of that amount. So. Any questions on any of the capital items? This is the draft budget bylaw, what it would look like. So we've got our user fee revenues as our main source of revenue, starting at 3.9 and growing to 4.5 million. Shows a net income from operations ranging from 1.1 million to 1.7 million. And page 2 of that's on page 11 of your agenda, and page 2 of that shows our annual cash surplus or deficit, and you can see the water fund is generating a surplus each year, except for 2023, ranging from 661,000 up to 1.3 million, and the loss in 2023 of 207,000. A lot of this is predicated on how much capital works we're doing. So you can see in 2023, the capital expenditures, the very top line, has 2.3 million of capital. And that when we have that much capital in a year, the fund cannot sustain that, so we end up with a loss that year, which will be funded from the accumulated surplus. So the good news with this fund, it's very healthy, as we'll see here. The accumulated surplus projected at this point in time, the end of 2020, is 5.4 million and 8.2 million at the end of 2024, and it continues to grow after that as well. I do have some ideas about that, which I will get to on the next slide. So other items to be considered. So currently in our water fees, we have a water treatment plant reserve fee, which we set up a number of years ago to collect funds to help fund the building of the water treatment plant. And we did manage to build it without the city or the ratepayers incurring any debt. The debt that we do have relating to the treatment plant all relates to the development side of it, which there was not enough money in the DCCs. So this fee that we put on there and other monies in the water fund did well to fund the city's portion of that development. So anyways, the water treatment plant reserve fee, which works out to $36.40 a year at this time, $230,000. Question I have for council is, since the plant is now built, do we remove that fee, retain the fee, and transfer it to a capital reserve for future water treatment plant expansions and replacements of the membranes when they come up in 8 to 10 years, and they're fairly expensive. So it is an opportunity to just divert that fee out of general revenues and into a reserve for either of those, say for expansion or for replacement of the membranes. The other idea here is in 2019, we froze the rates from 2018, so we did not have an increase in the water rates in 2019, and I would suggest that we just continue with that for next year as well. Both things could actually be done if council wished, setting up the reserve and freezing the rates. Transferring that $230,000 annually into a reserve fund over 10 years would put $2.3 million into that reserve fund, which then when the expansion of ERWS happens, the city again will be in a good position to fund it without having to borrow. So there's a couple options there that I'd certainly like to have council's input on.
Councillor Fraz, then Mayor Main, then Councillor O'Brien.
Through the mayor to the Director of Finance, just regarding keeping that reserve fee going for future replacement costs, like you mentioned with the membrane, though. We wouldn't necessarily have to keep it at the same rate, though, too, right? We could reduce the amount and still put towards for future reserve. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, yes, you could do whatever you want to do with that rate. So yeah, if you wanted to lower it to $25 a year per account, that would be fine, or some other amount, whatever council chose to put in there.
Follow up.
So with that in mind, then, could we get some guidance on perhaps what might be required as a reserve amount in that 8 to 10 years? So we could, if we were to go that route, we know what number to be budgeting with.
If I may, Your Worship, yes, I can try and come up with something. I don't have that number right here with me, but I can certainly come back with a number or provide council with what the ideal reserve might be for that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien, I'll let you go first, and then I'll come in behind you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to comments to Mr. Butterworth here. The charges are currently incurred by the water rate users anyways right now are exactly as showing here. So your suggestion is to retain those or leave those rates the same to build up a considerable hefty reserve anyways that's going to give us future expansion, which I think is a good move to go, my own personal opinion. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be just for the filter membrane replacement. It could be for expansion or anything else with the growth that we're incurring in Parksville right now. That's I'm a little concerned with. So if it meant adding filters into those racks anyways, because we have more water uses type of thing. So it could be used for anything to do with the capital equipment for the ERWS. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, yes, that would be correct. This would be for, essentially this fee right now that we're charging is for water treatment plant reserve.
Right.
So it would relate to anything relating to the water treatment plant capital-wise.
Thank you. And as follow-up, Your Worship, then just on part 2 of this, the freeze 2019 rates for 2020, then that would give us still that hefty reserve anyways. If we froze it at the existing rates, we're still going to continue to build surplus each time to give us that expansion fund as needed.
If I may, Your Worship, yeah, freezing the rates for 2020, it's $76,000 a year, and so that is frozen in perpetuity. At least that 76,000 is lost. So over 10 years, I put it into my model just to see what it would do, and it dropped the accumulated surplus by approximately $1 million at the end of the 10 years. But as it was at, I believe, 11.4 million, it went to 10.4 million. Putting also the annual 230,000 into a reserve fund will also, that amount is going to hit the accumulated surplus as well. So over 10 years, that's going to be 2.5 million or so. So there's still room in the accumulated surplus to absorb that, and possibly future rate freezes as well. I think it could play it year by year. Be one way to go.
That's excellent. Thank you.
It goes against my better judgment in this with reserves. First off, we've been hitting the people of Parksville for the last number of years, for at least 10 years that I'm aware of, with continually increasing water rates and reserves and everything else to build this plant. They've paid for this plant once. Now what we're saying is continue to put this $36 a year plus the $76,000 a year so that you can pay for it again. I think it's wrong for that to happen. I think what should happen is that come 10 years down the road, when we need to go on with other things, then the people who are living here at the time should then look at paying for it, just like the people that had to pay for the water treatment plant before had to pay for it. I'm sorry, we've got 10 million, we're going to have $12 million in a fund, in a reserve fund. We all talked about it at one point in time about how much our reserve funds keep increasing and keep increasing. I don't see the need for this to keep going up. I think let's give the people of Parksville a break, and let's reduce these fees to them so that it's, and if we need it in 10 years from now for a replacement, then we still got $10, $11 million worth of surplus there to deal with. So that would be my suggestion on it, and I actually am prepared to make a resolution that $36.40 per year be eliminated, and that the $76,000 be eliminated as well. Please, go ahead.
If I
Before
may,
I ask
Worship.
for a seconder.
Sorry. Yeah. Should I wait till you have a second?
No, feel free.
Because I think the second part of it, what I'm suggesting on here is that we would freeze the 2019 rates for 2020. So we're not collecting $76,000 extra, we're collecting $76,000 less in 2020. That's what number 2 on that slide represents. So it's not an extra money, it's actually less money. So it's freezing 2019 rates. So I'm just showing that it works out to $76,000 a year.
Okay, my
less
misreading of what
money.
you said, then I'll leave that one alone if we're given 76, but the first one for sure, I will keep that part of it alive. So I need a seconder for my motion if somebody wishes. Councillor Wilson, the seconded. Discussion? Councillor Fraz?
To Council through the Mayor, I understand your reasoning, like you mentioned, about having to pay for it twice. Well, I think being responsible, fiscally responsible, means though that we know there's going to be costs in the future, and we should put some savings aside for that. I don't think we have to charge it at a rate that's going to cover the complete cost, but I think putting towards it is a responsibility we have. Much the same like with our vehicles there, we buy the vehicles and then we charge them out so that we can cover their capital replacement. I think that's what we're doing, is we're thinking ahead in the future so we don't put future councils or residents in that tough position where they have to increase the rate. So I could support reducing the amount. I wouldn't support eliminating it. I think if we knew what that kind of future costs that we would be looking at 10 years out, then we could better determine if we want to be at, if it requires $30 per year per account, maybe we come in at $15 per year. And it's still a reduction from what we would be seeing currently. So there'd still be some cost benefit, but then we're also thinking forward for the future.
Thank you. Councillor Greer had his hand up earlier and I missed him.
Thank you, Your Worship. But you spoke just about what I was going to say as well. So I think freezing the rates could be lifted. But I do agree with you that the taxpayers have really spent a lot of money over the last 10 years with this surplus. And maybe at this time they deserve a break for at least the next 5 years.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I agree with Councillor Fraz. My first question today was the elimination of a contingency fund. We've grown at a really alarmingly rate in the last 2 years, and I expect that that rate will continue. So we're not looking at 10 years out where we're going to need more water issue and other growth. I would be in favor of a decreasing of the water treatment plant reserve fee, but I'm most definitely not in favor of removing it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, through the mayor. I agree with Councillor Fraz that we get some kind of costing, first of all, to find out what we might need in 10 years. Then we know whether or not we should make this move. So perhaps if we get that first, then we can make a better decision.
Okay. I hear what everybody's saying, and everybody has valid arguments about it, but we already have, correct me if I'm wrong, this would generate $12 million by the time we were done by putting this $230,000 into the fund. Just want to make sure I've got the numbers right. Into the surplus. The surplus would rise to 12 million over the next 10 years?
No, if I may, Your Worship. Right now, the model, the way it is, which currently has the 3640 in there, and has a 2% increase in 2020, that generates, with our model at 2029, we have a surplus of 11.4 million. If we eliminate the 3640, that's going to take $230,000 out per year, so that 11.4 million will go down by approximately $2.5 to $3 million, so it would be down to $8 million. Freezing the 2019 rates, or freezing the 2020 rates at 2019 levels will also reduce it another $1 million, so now we're looking at approximately $4 million, $3.5 to $4 million less in 2029 than we currently have. So the water treatment plant fee is $230,000 annually. If you do that over 10 years, that's approximately $2.5 to $3 million. So
I
that's
get
the impact of
2.3,
it.
but that's okay.
And it is in these numbers that are on the slide previous slide right there. It is included in these numbers right now as part of the accumulated surplus.
I still go back to the fact that the $36.40 a year from each of the households, $230,000 annually, to build a fund up for people living in Parksville today to be paying for something that's going to happen 10 years down the road is, in my mind, unfair to those people. It is, they have already paid for this water plant, and they've paid for it in numerous ways, including higher water bills and fees and everything else that we could throw at them over the last 10 years to raise the money so that we didn't have to borrow any money. And that's all fair, and it worked out well. But at the end of the day here, we're going to say, okay, you paid that, now you're going to pay for the next guy out there too, because if I don't expect that, well, maybe I will be here in 10 years, I don't know, but you know, some of us will move away, some of us will not be living in town, some of us will be whatever, and yet we're still paying for that to happen again. So we've paid for it twice, is what my concern here is, and that's where we have a problem with the reserve. Even if you took all those things away, you still have what, $6 or $7 million in surplus sitting in the bank. So if we have to build something on, do an addition, we've got a $7 million jump that, again, was paid for by the people that are living in Parksville today, not 10 years from now. So you have to look at this and say, what's the fair thing to do? Is it fair to charge Councillor Chandler for something that he may not even be here for in 10 years? So that's my argument about this. Councillor Frass.
Just speaking of that point again, I don't think it needs to be an all or nothing. I think we need to be offering some support to our future. This is what you do with your personal finance. This is what I think is a good way to do it for the city as well. So if we knew what the amount was that we are going to need at some replacement costs or expansion in the future, if we can help put us in a position so that decisions in the future aren't going to always be going to referendum. We see that now with things like recreation services through the RDN. They're going to have to put things to referendum. And if we were able to plan ahead a little bit to help subsidize it to some extent, it's no different than we do with our fire trucks or with basically anything that's put us in such a strong financial position now with the city, is because in previous years there's been some money put aside thinking ahead. So my argument is just that we don't have to be all or nothing. Let's figure out what the cost is that we anticipate for future residents and put something aside to help the pain of that increase at that time.
Thank you, Your Worship. My comments, as well as Mr. Councillor Frass, is pretty similar. To me, the $36.40 a year per account that we're already collecting anyways on this amount anyways, it's $36.40 a year. It's not, to me, it really would be a hardship. The ratepayers have already established that this is in their budget anyways as of right now, and to take that down to reduce it and so forth, I doubt how many is even going to notice it, quite frankly. The thing is that the assumption here is that we're saving this up. Mr. Butterworth has projected out for 10 years. But in my estimation, and many others that are in the know, that this money is going to be spent far before 10 years. I don't believe that we're going to be waiting for the 10 years. It's going to be, if we're talking about in the forecast here, we're looking at a reservoir expansion type of thing. And so the thing is that I believe that money is going to be used far sooner than when it reaches its maximum amount, as you've been discussing, for 10 years. And the trouble is, or the thing is that with all the extra growth that we have in this city, is that actually it's the new residents that are going to be paying for this. The new residents that have filled up all of our subdivisions and so forth that have now been built and so forth, they are the ones that are going to be paying for this. So they're here, but the thing is they're putting an extra strain on our water. And so the thing is that I think it's very prudent for us to look at this, because when I look at expansion of reservoirs, $7 million doesn't go very long way to actually build what we're going to need to actually continue to supply water. We all know what's going on. I mean, climate change or not, whatever, you can't deny the fact that we have more droughts in the summers than we've ever had before. And that's just, I don't care about the rest of the world. I'm talking what we're experiencing right here in Parksville. So the thing is that our aquifers are suffering. We know that, that's a fact. And so the thing is that we're going to need expansion. And I think it's going to be very soon type of thing. So I think it's very prudent to leave this in exactly as it is, because I think it's going to make it so that perhaps if we do an expansion, we don't have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for another loan referendum approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment. I think much the same. It's quite a debate as to who pays for it now, who pays for it later. But I really I'm more concerned about Grandma Chandler than myself right now. And I think with a lot of people ultimately on fixed income and being the second oldest population in British Columbia here, I think that we really need to look at trying to reduce monies for people that are on fixed incomes on every occasion. So I think a reduction of, say, $25 out of the 36 would still give us some sort of an opportunity to give back, plus retain some dollars. So that would be my comment. I'd love to see something like that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to see whether or not we can refer this to staff to get a costing so we can make a decision.
If I may, Your Worship, at this point, there's not really a panic to either reduce this fee or make a decision today, because I'm not bringing any fees forward to council for at least 3 or 4 months, so for the water fees or the sewer and water. So we could just push this off until I bring a report forward and then decide at that time whether you want to keep it in or not keep it in, and I can have some more information at that point in time.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Although we're 3/4 of the way into this discussion, it would be kind of, we'd have to rechew our food again the second time in 3 or 4 months doesn't seem to make any sense. So if it's okay with council, and I'll ask for your indulgence that we continue this discussion for 5 minutes more and one more time around for everybody, and we'll go from there. Councillor Fraz, I'm going to give you another shot at it.
So since we're going to be making a decision this today, I'd like to make amendment to it that we reduce the fee down to $20 per account.
Isn't there a motion on the floor now?
This is offering an amendment.
Did and it was seconded, right? Yeah, Marilyn seconded it. Councillor Wilson, sorry. Okay, so we have a motion. Are you making an amendment? I don't think that's, yeah, it's 2 different motions. We'd have to defeat this one if that's what council so chooses, and then bring it back in with your motion, okay?
Is it not an amendment? We're just talking about the rate. You're going from 36.40 to 0. I'm saying to bring it at 25, or sorry, pardon me, 20.
Well, I mean, it says to be eliminated in the motion. Look, we'll just go around it one more time, and then we can vote on it. It doesn't look like it's got much chance because of the discussion I'm hearing, but I'm going to take one more shot at it anyways before we get there. And then if it is defeated, then we can bring yours back immediately, and we don't even have to have discussion at that point if that's what everybody wants. Does that make sense? All right, Councillor Fraz, any other discussion? Councillor Greer, and then I will speak, and then we'll call the question.
Yeah, after reconsidering this thing, I think Councillor Fraz has got a good idea. I think we should have something, not necessarily eliminate the whole thing. So I would be willing to go with a part payment on this.
I'm up, is what I'm being told. Couple of things quickly for you to consider when you're voting on this. And remember that if nobody changes their mind, nothing gets changed. So let's, keep that in the back of your head. First off, the 3640, it's only 3640. Gosh, I'm tired of that. I hear that all the time at the region. It's only an $8 charge that's going to each of our presidents for this. It's only $12 for that. It's only $22 for this. That's why we've got a 6.6% tax increase from the region in Parksville coming up, is because it's only for $36 or $40. So I believe you have to fight for every penny in our budget. So that's why I'm doing it. As far as covering the costs of future by the new people moving in, that's what DCCs do. That's what the DCCs are out there for, is that they're put in place so that they pay for the future costs that weren't paid for before. So in my mind, I can live with the $25 if that's where we end up going today. I just think as a token to our people who have been paying and paying and paying, it's not a bad token to give them their money back once in a while either. And so I'm going to be voting in favor of this motion. So I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion of eliminating $36.40, lonely as I am sitting here, I still feel very strongly for it. All right. And I would assume we have to keep track of the opposings. So everybody but me. That's easy to do. All right. Now, Councillor Fraz, sorry for the delay, but to do it properly.
Okay, so then my motion would be that we reduce the fee from $36.40 per year per account to $20 per year per account.
Discussion, does anybody have a quick comment? Councillor Patterson?
First, as he seconded.
He's just seconded. He wasn't
Okay,
speaking.
you want a question? In this motion, are we looking at the freeze for 2019 rates, or is that a given? That's directed to you, Your Worship.
It's in the budget that way, so if we don't touch it, it stays as a freeze. Is that correct? No, you're saying no. I thought you said yes earlier.
Currently, if I may,
My
Your
God,
Worship,
how could this be that complicated?
currently 2% for 2020 is in the budget. This was just a suggestion I came up with actually just today to throw it in there because the reserves are so healthy. I thought just freeze the rates another year. We froze it in 2019 for 2018, so we haven't had a rate increase since 2018, and freeze it again at this point. That was just a suggestion I wanted council's input on.
Okay, so I'm just so I'm clear, you said because the reserves are so healthy. Is that what you said? Okay. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Then at this point in time, I'd like to add a friendly amendment to Councillor Fraz's motion to freeze the 2020 rates at the 2019 rates in addition.
You ready? You okay with that? Because I think that's what he meant to say all along. So, okay, so that's fine, and we don't need a seconder for it. Any further discussion? Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to say I'm going to support this motion for the $20 a year per account anyways. I think it's a wise thing to do, and I appreciate the suggestion by Mr. Butterworth. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favors? 25, sorry, just make $20 for the account and freeze the 70, or the rates, the 2019 rates. All right, calling it? They did? Yeah, then we all did. Yeah, yeah. I didn't call the question. They're just way ahead of me today. No. I did. Yes. All right. Let's try to keep going. See what you've caused? Please, go forward.
If I may, Your Worship, so we're at this point here. Any questions or comments? We've already had some discussion. Any more
Anybody
discussion?
back there? Any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Next, sewer fund.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the sanitary sewer fund as opposed to the storm sewer fund. So the operating budget adjustments we have here, this one top item here is just a reminder that we are transferring over the costs of the RDN wastewater sewage plant from the general taxpayer onto the sewer ratepayer over a 10-year period. So each year we're transferring $250,000, and it grows every year by $250,000 until the full $2.5 million is transferred over to the general taxpayer, and the sewer ratepayer will be paying that. So it's done over a 10-year period. It was approved by the previous council because it's such a significant amount of money at $2.5 million versus our normal sewer ratepayers when we started this was just over $1 million. So we're transferring a substantial amount of costs onto the sewer ratepayer from the general taxpayer. So on here also is the other, adding the works adjacent to development and sewer easements. We do these 1 year at a time as well as a contingency. Sewer easements, those are if they come up, then we have a budget to move forward with an easement. There are a number of properties still out there where there's either not easements, and there should be, so we're working on that slowly, and works adjacent development as I described before for the water funds. And page 14 and 15 of your agenda is the 5-year sewer capital. Actually, that's the wrong page. That's page 13 of your agenda, sorry. It has all the descriptions. The big items on here, Bagshaw Street was moved up from 2025 and 2026, so it's $60,000 in 2020 and construction 2021 for $445,000. So that's a fairly big change. Budget cost increases on a number of the projects. The Highway 19A projects are new projects, again, to go along with the paving that's in the general fund. There is some sanitary sewer work to be done as well at that time. And another new project is the Morrison Avenue, Finholm to Acacia, as it was in the water fund. That's in 2022 and 23. And altogether, these total, over the 5 years, there's a net capital increase of $890,000 in this whole group of projects here, where you see some going down, some going up. It's actually a net increase of $890,000 over the 5 years.
Excuse me. It's 890,000 over the existing budget, or 890,000 total? Sorry.
If I may, Your Worship, yes, that's an increase from what we had in our previous plan. So
Okay.
there's just a number of projects that have been moved up, a number have been moved out, some cost increases, and in total are 890.
Over 5 years. I understand that. Now, I have one very important question for the Director of Operations. Are you going to be able to do all of this? Because we're budgeting. The Director of Engineering even gets better.
If I may, through your worship, yes, we've adjusted by the projects that you see moved out. We've made room for the asset management plan and the current projects that are in. We've tried to take a really hard look, both internally and then even with the management group, in terms of where we're going to need some outside or internal, external, like say other department resources, whether it be GIS or planning or bylaw, to try to make sure that if we've got it in the budget, it's going to actually be completed. So
Good, because
yes.
We don't want to be seeing push forwards at this time next year. Okay, so, all right, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Through your worship, to Director of Engineering. Just wondering about McKinnon Street, Hurst to Harnish, the design complete 2019, but moving the project out to 2029. Will that design still be appropriate in 2029?
If I may, through your worship, yes, it allows a little bit of time to have the design on the shelf. It won't change drastically. It just allows some time for some of the utilities were not, they had some life left in them, and it allows some time for that to hash out and also to iterate kind of with our asset management planning. So if it ends up after we've balanced everything at the end of the day, it might come back forward, but right now I think it's pretty safe to have it pushed out.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Mr. Doxey, if I may. I noticed on the Memorial Avenue project has actually been pushed out from 2020 to 2021. Could you just explain the reasoning for that?
If I may, through your worship, yes, actually, we had a report that we were working on, and part of that has to do with the budget cycle. So one of the options in the report that we're working on includes a little bit more due diligence in that there is a public space contemplated in one of the options. And part of the development of that public space is going to require some coordination with other department resources, even other city stakeholders, things like Chamber of Commerce or Downtown Business Improvement District, again, bylaw, communications. And so if council proceeds with that option, it will likely take a good chunk of 2020 to facilitate the planning and regulation of that space, and before we go to construction. And so I guess that was kind of an error in our report that we caught at the nth hour, and we wanted to fix that before we bring it to council on the 16th. But as a placeholder in budget, we have forecasted it to be, we've kind of forecasted a decision that it would be pushed. So.
Any others? Please continue.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the next slide actually is the capital plan. So I've just put that up on the screen, what the 5-year capital plan. So the previous slide was all the changes, and this is what the end result is of what it looks like. So you can see there's really only one project on there that's showing construction in 2020. There might be a couple in 2019 that are getting carried forward, but there isn't a lot of actual construction showing for 2020 in the sewer. There's a design of Bagshaw, that's a design stage, and Lombardi's a design as well. And the other project is a DCC, which is several years out. So as far as the sewer fund goes, there's not a lot of construction other than potential carry forwards from 2019, which don't show on here yet. They would show in the final budget. Back to where I was, okay. And this is the draft budget bylaw. So you can see the user fees here are increasing dramatically up near the top here with the extra charges to cover the cost of the wastewater plant. And that's offset by transfer to other funds down in the bottom. So we have extra revenues and we're transferring the money out to the general fund that's paying the bill. And then this one here is actually, the sewer fund is, at this point, we're transferring from our accumulated surplus each year based on the expenditures that we have and the revenues that we have. So we are drawing down our accumulated surplus, which shows up on here. It does start to increase, goes negative for a few years and then does start to increase. I think we can deal with the negatives as they come up because it does rebound back in later years, and in 2030 and onwards it's rebounding even further. So we do have not a lot of wiggle room with 2024 being only 40,000. That does have to stay positive in our plan. So at this point it's just above zero, which and other items to be considered. I don't have any at this time. So.
Any other questions for the sewer and the water? You're doing great.
I think that's all I have. So that's the end of my presentations. I think I've covered them all.
Just as a point of clarification for everybody, we had from last night's meeting, which obviously they didn't have enough time to get onto the slides, but there's two items. One was for the Parksville Curling Club for $2,000, and the other one was for the Bolinas Dry Grad for $6,187 that would have to be added into the budget. There's been no allocation for that at this point in time. So I need a motion for, let's take one at a time. Let's talk about the curling club. Do I have a motion from anyone regarding $2,000 contribution to the curling club? Councillor Patterson, seconded. Call for the second time. Seconded. Pardon? You want to second it for discussion purposes? All right. We're open for discussion. You get first shot.
Thank you, Your Worship. Why I asked for the budget from the group last night from the curling club, and why I'm putting it forward today. I, in my personal opinion, don't feel that this is a great deal different than some of the other organizations that we have put money forward in the past. We did for VIU students, for the, maybe Debbie could remind me, it was with Tinamera, the MBA, sports and leadership. This brings a great deal of people into our community. It is an economic benefit to the community, and I would think that Parksville as a whole, being a partner and showing that as a partner, a $2,000 request is quite small, considering they're looking at just the, like when you look at the financial statement on just one of their events, it would have been interesting to see a year because they do so much as far as the other events and everything that are held, and their membership is increasing. And this is a very, very busy arena. So those are some of my comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. My comments on that is regarding it, that I don't dispute the fact that they're doing a great job and they have increased in membership, which I think is admirable. I think they're doing a fantastic job, and they increased one sheet of ice as well, which is also great because it gets more curlers out there. My only question is that this is a bonds bill that they're hoping for sponsorship of, and I believe that although being worthy, there's many other sports organizations in our town, whether it's the soccer people or the baseball people, the pickleball people. The thing is that have also tournaments and so forth, and I believe that it's not necessary to do it this way. I believe there's a plan and process, and there's a grant and aid process, and they would definitely have the option of applying for the grant and aid in the spring session, I would assume, which would be insufficient time to run this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I would just like to say I think that they're a great organization. It's funded, primarily through volunteer work. There's a lot of volunteerism there. I'd like to support in some way, shape, or form. I'd like to also see the RDN support because it is their building. So I would like to see some sort of funding available for them, but that remains to be seen what we could come up with. I'd like to see half of what they're asking, at least. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fraz.
My comments to council is just to remind that we agreed about how we would fund grants earlier in our term, and I think it's important that we stick to that process. We have a grant funding process here for the city, but also keep in mind that when it comes to recreation, we also participate in recreational grants through the RDN. Same thing for economic development. We pay into economic development grants in the RDN, and as well we also pay into community grants at the RDN. So there's many functions that we do put that money forward, and I think it's important that these groups then we can steer them in the right direction so that they can access that money, because it is our money. And if it's not working for us that way, then perhaps we should take that money back from the RDN and reallocate it to bolster our grant funding opportunities that we have here. I don't think it's good for us to be putting out grant opportunities and then giving special consideration outside of it as well. So my suggestion would be let's stick to the way that we fund grants, and that would be that.
Thank you. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a motion on the books that we don't give out anything other than grant and aid, and I think I made that some months ago, and it was approved. The other aspect is that not only the curling, but the pickleball and the hockey and the ball, most of these things are regional events. Most of these people, or a lot of these people, don't come from Parksville. So it should be a region. If they want money, they should go to the region, all of those organizations. And furthermore, when I see what they're spending and what their total expenses is, it's not very much. I ran 8 tournaments, hockey tournaments here, where we brought in 32 teams from all over. My budget was $64,000, $65,000, and over those each year, and I never did come to council for any money. We raised the $64,000 and $65,000 every year ourselves. So this is a small amount. Surely to goodness they can raise it, but it is a regional event, and even though it's held in Parksville. But we have a motion on the books not to give out money willy-nilly like we have in the past, and I think we should stick to that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I also agree that we have a grant and aid, and although it looks good for Parksville to support these organizations, I also think that we have to think fairly about all the other sports organizations, and also to Councillor Fraz's comment that the RDN has money, maybe we can direct them to the RDN for those extra funding. So I think that they need to go through a grant and aid for us and be directed to the RDN for other funding. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Worship. I did want to say that we've put a great deal of money into some of the different sports organizations in this community, pickleball being one, it's been mentioned. We do not put money into the curling club except for their taxation request. So those would be some of my points being made, that yes, we own the land, but the RDN owns the building. So it looks like my motion's going to fail. So I would request staff and perhaps Mayor Main and Councillor Fraz to reach out to this organization and give them some help with drafting or who to see in regards with the RDN, because Councillor Fraz is absolutely correct. There is a great deal of funds that bypass the city of Parksville that should ultimately remain in the city of Parksville.
Just a quick comment on that, because you're absolutely right, Councillor Patterson and Councillor Fraz, is that we contribute a significant amount of money to the region for all these different committees and grants and so on. And it's surprising that very few applications come from the city, from the associations in Parksville itself. We go to these meetings and we see from Qualicum Beach, from all the electoral areas, from Lanceville, whatever the case may be, I think I've seen maybe one or two in the last 12 months that come from the city of Parksville. So we've got to learn to go to the region to get some of these grants, and they are giving significantly more funding than what we are capable to do with a $2,500 budget for grant and aid. So I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Patterson. I think what we need to do is help them get to the region and apply in the right spot or spots for the funding. So having said that, let's call the question. All those in favor? We have one of those. And opposed? Okay. She writes it down, and everybody else. That's what you did for me anyways. All right. Now we have the one for the dry grad in the amount of $6,187. I need a mover and a seconder for a motion to donate that money. Not seeing any. I'll ask one more time. I need a mover and a seconder. Then ends the discussion right then and there. Thank you very much. Councillor Greer, are you moving this?
No, I'm not. I'm just suggesting maybe we can recommend to them as well,
We could do that.
curling club, to go to the grant and aid, and over the last several years, they have gone to the grant and aid.
All right. Well, and they may have. I don't remember. Do you? If they went to their dry grad for the region? Did they go to the region?
They've
Okay.
gone to the city on several
Yes,
occasions.
yes, and I knew that, but I was wondering about the region. Okay. All right, thanks. Do you have some other new business that you wish to bring up? No? Speak or forever? Okay, go ahead. Give us some.
Just in regard to the recreation grants, as an example, that there was still money left on the table at the last round of funding for recreational grants. Had groups applied, I didn't see any that applied that got denied. So it's just a lack of the knowledge, perhaps, that the grants are out there and how to apply for them. So I'll take up Teresa Patterson's request there that we reach out to these groups and help them get in touch with how they apply for these grants.
Okay, I'm being handed something here. Just give me a second. Okay, because I'm not sure what that's for.
If I may, Your Worship, Council will recall that staff received direction earlier this year to expand the boundaries of the property tax, downtown revitalization property tax exemption. And as part of the legislative requirements, that bylaw actually needs to be considered in the context of your budgeting process. So Council has granted 2 readings to the bylaw already, and what this would do is expand the exemption for property taxes for 5 years to the opposite side of the street that we currently have. And it also amends that exemption by including multifamily residential in addition to commercial. And so the tax or financial implications were addressed in the staff report, which was presented to Council in July. But we need to have Council consider and pass a motion in your budgeting process, and then we need to forward it to the province. So if Council would like to proceed with the statutory process for that bylaw, we require a motion during this meeting.
All right. Moved by Councillor Greer. Thank you. I keep getting these points from over here. All right, so we've pretty well, correct me if I'm wrong, you've done it twice already tonight, Director. But we're pretty well wrapped up now on our budgeting process based on all the information that we've provided today.
Yes, that's all I have to present. So based on comments and the resolution tonight, I would just have to change the water fund to adjust that billing amount and the revenues, and so that's the only adjustment I would have to make based on what we've had tonight.
Thank you. Well, the exciting part then comes with this next motion. So I'd like to make the motion to direct staff to prepare budget bylaw for the city's 2020 provisional budget. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Fraz, second by, I'll give it to Councillor Wilson this time. All right. Any discussion? There we go. Next time we will hear from this will be in March? December 16th. December? Well, no, December 16th is out now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what we'll put the bylaws for.
Oh, okay. All right. So she just answered the question for me. Thank you, but okay. All right, all in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. It's another year in the can. That's a wrap for the budgets. Thank you for now until we get to the early time. I need a movement to adjourn.
Just before, maybe just to clarify that we will not have a meeting on the 10th.
Okay, that's true. We were scheduled to have a meeting on the 10th, and we are now going to eliminate that meeting because we don't need it, all right? So that's wiped off your schedule. And the next meeting would then be this December 16th, standard meeting, 2 o'clock, the regular council meeting, all right? Great. I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Greer, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, folks. Good meeting. Thanks, Lucky. Good job.